So why are we feeling like we have to, as law enforcement, that we have to use lesser force than necessary when it's obviously justified to use deadly force? Because of the way the nation is going, a bunch of whiners and crybabies, a bunch of anti-police, a bunch of sensitive people expect you, that the officers, to do that. It's unrealistic. It doesn't make sense. And it's not their lives on the line. They just don't like that someone got shot, regardless of how justified it was. Quit chasing people with tasers, flat out. I'm gonna say that, you can argue with me, I don't care. It's wrong, it is dumb, okay? I'm not calling these officers dumb. The actions, the choices to do that are dumb.
The opinions expressed here do not necessarily reflect those of our sponsors.
Blu Wolf Podcast.
This episode of the Blu Wolf Podcast is brought to you by Blue Line Professional Inspections. Check out blinspections.net for all your inspection needs, including home inspection, wood-destroying insect inspection, sewer drain inspection, and on-site water treatment inspection. Blue Line is a first responder-owned business.
Welcome to the Blu Wolf Podcast. I'm Willie Cantu. Coming to you from San Antonio, the Barney area. I'm doing a new segment that I think is extremely important. I think it'd be extremely beneficial to law enforcement, especially, and to the citizens that I think should know what our actions and justifications can be and should be within their duties of enforcing the law and arresting bad guys. But it's a very touchy situation because we're critiquing the actions of law enforcement officers, men and women, that they may construe it to be degrading, may construe it to be making fun of them, to embarrassment and things like that. I understand that. That happened. It started way back when I began in 1989. We heard this all the time. Anytime officers were talking about police actions and we started saying, well, they should have and they would have, or I would have, or I could have, or things like that, you'd always hear someone say, well, you're doing Monday morning quarterbacking, is what that was. And it was obviously looked down upon. And usually it would just prevent the conversation from happening at all, out of respect, understandably. But these situations need to be discussed, especially if they ended up in really bad consequences where officers were killed, suspects were killed, somebody got seriously injured, maybe some innocent bystanders got injured, or we maybe want to give praise to it and use it as an example of what you should do. But they need to be talked about. So I need to explain what exactly a Monday morning quarterback is. And as simple as it sounds, I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence, but I think it's important. So Monday morning quarterbacking came from, of course, people speaking about the Sunday night football game that occurred the day before, and their favorite team most likely lost, and they're upset, and they're talking to their friends about what Tom Brady should have done. And given their non-professional opinions and not experienced opinions about what he should have done. And the funny thing about it is that many of them, to include myself, have never been a professional quarterback in football. I was a backup quarterback in high school, but backup. So I'm not even close to what Tom Brady would know. But here we are critiquing what he should have done as if it was that easy. Now, mind you, a lot of these situations are happening in split seconds, and here we are critiquing them the next day. So that's what Monday morning quarterbacking means. But it's extremely important to understand that if someone is critiquing and someone is that Monday morning quarterback, so to speak, that they know what they're talking about, especially if you're going to use it in the situations that I talked about to learn from what good or bad and what you should have done. And people will and should trust you with your opinion if you have the credentials to back that up. I believe in instances of law enforcement that I have been that so-called quarterback. So I do have a right to critique the actions of officers. I'm a law enforcement instructor. I have been for 20 years. I've been to Mexico. I've been to Brazil. I've trained local, and county, and federal law enforcement and tactics. I'm not saying I'm the best, but I think I do pretty well. We get a lot of good feedback, and it's very helpful. I have my own ethics about how I teach, how I instruct, what I teach, because I don't want to be looked at as by anyone as not knowing what I'm talking about. I won't teach, for example, I've never been a rifle guy, so to speak. I carried a rifle briefly when I first got onto SWAT, but I was never an instructor, nor will I attempt to try to teach tactics with a rifle. I could shoot the heck out of a rifle, but I won't even try to teach it, because that's not what I carried really for most of my career in SWAT. I carried a submachine gun. Now I'm a submachine gun instructor, so I can have a good opinion with that. But nonetheless, that is my justification for being able to talk about these situations. And I also have to be careful not to be personally begrudging these officers, whether I know them or not. And many of these officers I don't know at all, not personally or anything like that. I just know that they're law enforcement officers, that they're out there doing what I did for 33 years and doing the best that they can. And a lot of these officers are just doing that, the best that they can with what they know. And for a lot of them, it's not their fault. That's the way they were taught. And God knows who taught them. I've seen a lot of instructors teach things they have no clue about what they're teaching. They have no experience in it, and they never will. And that's not good. Sorry to say, that's not good. But officers can see right through that person. They know when you're squared away. They know when you're switched on, is what I call it. So now that that's been cleared up, let's get to the issue of this segment here. I keep on seeing officers involved in foot chases with suspects for whatever reason, where the officers running after these suspects with a taser drawn. A taser is a less lethal weapon that you may or may not have assigned to you. Not every officer has a taser assigned to them. But what I have been seeing is officers chasing suspects with a taser drawn in their hand, and usually their strong hand, or what we call their weapon hand, after a suspect that sometimes they know they are armed. They see the weapon. They have seen the weapon. However, we're all supposed to believe that suspects are armed until we are able to search them or frisk them to make sure that they're not. That is what is taught. That was taught from day one. But these officers are assuming that when I catch up to this suspect, I'm going to use this less lethal weapon. And I've cherry-picked some videos that I found. I won't say found, but they're on the SAPD website. And they're from all situations in SAPD and their SAPD officers. And I'm not going to show a whole bunch of them, but just a couple of them, actually 3 of them to be exact. 2 of them that show why you shouldn't do it, and 1 of them that shows when they didn't do it, how successful it was, so to speak. But what I found out, and this was like recent when I was looking at them, was that, because I didn't care about the date or time necessarily. I did care about, I knew it was at night. You can see that it's at night, which a lot of bad things happen at night, but not everything. That these clips are from shootings in San Antonio by San Antonio police officers, 2 that occurred within the same month, in October of 2023, and 1 that occurred in November of 2023. And what's scary is that the 2 that I'm going to talk about, where the officers didn't do what they should have, I believe, happened in the same month and just a few days apart, 6 days apart to be exact. So I think it's important to explain to my non-law enforcement listeners what exactly a taser is. Now, taser is just a trademark name, really, for what is correctly described as a conductive energy device, or CDE. Taser International, which was the company that invented these, was bought out by a company called Axon. Now, from what I remember before I retired, Axon were the people that created the body cams that we wore when I was on duty. But Taser has stuck with that weapon because it's also often used as a verb. So, they got tased. It wouldn't sound right to say, yeah, I Axoned him. Now, it's gone way too far now, and so it's stuck with Taser. And from what I believe, they're pretty much the only CDE that I've seen used anywhere. I know within SAPD. But what it does, it creates a modulated electric current designed to disrupt voluntary control of muscles, causing neuromuscular incapacitation. Shock them, kind of like a stun gun in a sense. However, a taser deploys two what they call probes. They look like fish hooks that are straightened out. They have a little barb at the end that are connected to copper wires within the cartridge that is attached to the weapon. And when they fire, they stay in the weapon. They don't, because the weapon is what creates the charge. But the distance for the probes is only 21 feet, 7 yards. Now, mind you, the average shooting distance since I've been on in 1989 and still is to this day is 5 to 7 yards. Those are the statistics of police shootings. That's how close that we are in majority of these shootings. I'm not saying always, but in the majority of them, that's the average. Okay, so that is why I believe Taser created that distance for the tasers. Not to mention, further description is that when you deploy the taser and shoot a suspect or someone with it, the probes have to have the correct spread. So when they come out, they're not going to stay together, they got to spread. And both of them have to make contact. If you miss with one, it's not halfway. You just might as well have missed with both. It won't work at all. If you're too close and there's not enough of a spread on the body, it won't create the right spacing for the amount of charge that's necessary to incapacitate, to create neuromuscular incapacitation. So there's a lot that's involved with it. For one, you have to estimate that you're within the right distance. Now, mind you, if it's right at 21 feet, those probes are going to spread quite a bit. It's like a shotgun. Shotgun, the closer you shoot, let's say buckshot, you're going to have a tighter group of the pellets. The further out, the pellets spread out more because there's no rifling or anything like that, and they're just going to spread out. So the same way with the taser. Or you can take a taser, take the cartridge off, and you can stun them directly. They call it a drive stun, as you would a stun gun. And so that's how they work. Okay. Some suspects have been able to fight through it, whether they're on dope, mentally crazy, or both. They can fight through it. It's been done before. Fight through it enough to just knock one of the tasers out. I've seen videos of these guys fight through and then pull a taser out, and now there's no longer a charge. So at that point, officer has to reload a cartridge, another cartridge, or go hands-on, drive stun nonetheless. But it is a less lethal device. Okay, it is an intermediate weapon. It's not deadly force. It doesn't fall within that spectrum. So that's important to understand. It's mostly polymer, like plastic, like a Glock. Or nowadays, a lot of guns are polymer. It's lightweight. The handle is like the grip of a gun. It most likely would have a laser sight on it. It has no recoil. Okay. Now, I don't want to get into so much about the tactics of what departments are implementing on the use and how you carry these tasers, because that's a whole nother rabbit hole that I can go down, because I totally disagree with a lot of the ways that they do this. But nonetheless, if it's in your hand, it feels like a handgun. And when you're under stress, you're not going to feel the weight of it. You're not going to, because a handgun is going to be much, much heavier, especially a fully loaded handgun. And you just know you have something in your hand that feels like a handgun. And we've had, and if you watch the news and pay attention, there have been officers that have drawn their tasers drawn their handguns thinking that they had a taser in their hand, and ended up shooting a suspect unnecessarily. So that's how things occur with that taser. So nonetheless, you have to understand also, it's by what I've described, it's not 100% effective, nor is a handgun really. People have been shot and still are able to fight through that. They may die later, but adrenaline and drugs and just the sheer will and toughness to fight, people have worked through that and finished some deadly action that they were committing. So, but nonetheless, it's a step down of deadly force when you're justified in using deadly force. So why is it that officers are chasing suspects with tasers in the hand? Why is it that this is their go-to weapon when they see a suspect? Let's say they see a gun in their waistband. They know they're armed, or they know who the suspect is because they're targeting him, and they know his violent history. They know that he is known to carry a weapon 95% of the time, if not more. Why are they drawing? Their first thought is that I get out to chase this person or confront this person with a taser in their hand. Now, mind you have to understand that action beats reaction. And if something other than a deadly force weapon is occupying your strong hand, that puts you further behind the reactionary curve if this guy decides to use the weapon they're carrying. And he is not trying to use lesser force than what he wants. He is trying to kill you. I have yet to hear somebody say, hey, some suspects say in a statement, well, I wasn't trying to kill the officer. I was trying to use less lethal force on him. That doesn't happen. So why are we feeling like we have to, as law enforcement, that we have to use lesser force than necessary when it's obviously justified to use deadly force? I've seen officers, again, chasing this suspect who's running away from them. Here's the other thing. According to policy and I believe Taser's training, I didn't ever carry a Taser. I never wanted to. I've seen them work. They're awesome when they do work, but I've also seen them not work. But you are not supposed to tase somebody that's running away from you or while they're running. The reason for that is because if you tase this person as they're running full speed and it seizes them up neuromuscularly and they're going face first, which is forward, they cannot put their hands out in front of them to catch their fall. So most likely they're gonna land like an airplane that doesn't have its front wheel. They're gonna go head first into whatever ground that is in front of them, concrete, rock, dirt, grass, whatever. But it especially if it's concrete or asphalt, it's gonna cause some damage on them. I'd imagine though, if you're justified in using deadly force and you tase them and that's all they get and they don't die, then they're gonna be lauded. The officer's gonna be lauded, but they really shouldn't, because in the grand scheme of things, they should be actually reprimanded for doing something like that. So they don't do it again, because the next person may turn around and shoot them right before they deploy it. The other thing is, I'm not trying to say that everybody needs to be shot, okay? We are reactionary. What has to happen, just the fact that they have a weapon on them does not mean that my life at that moment is in imminent danger. And that's when we are justified in using deadly force. We are trained as law enforcement to stop the deadly threat, stop it. We are not trained to kill people. I've heard that so many times. Officers are trained to shoot to kill, even from officers. No, we are not. We are not trained to shoot to kill people. We are trained, when we use deadly force, to shoot center body mass. Why center body mass? Because that's the larger target. And you hear idiots that don't know anything say, well, why didn't he shoot him in the arms? Why didn't he shoot him in the legs? Those are smaller targets, and they're also very mobile. They're very difficult to hit when an officer is under stress. You can't forget about the stress that an officer has at that moment, that he is implementing whatever he's been doing. Maybe he's running, maybe he was involved in a struggle and then was running. His adrenaline is rushing, because that's what it is. That's what happens when you're involved in those situations, because you know that there's a great chance of being killed or seriously injured or harmed in any way. You are hyped up. All those physiological and psychological issues that go along with it are going full speed at that point. So we do not shoot people to kill. We shoot center body mass, because that is the larger target. And yeah, some people can die if you get hit in the heart, or you get hit in these vital organs, or you get hit enough, or you bleed out. That's what happens. But nowadays we have medical assistance right away, or the officer knows how to use it, or employ medical assistance himself, things like that. I always think, let's go back. This dude is responsible for his own actions. He's what made me do that. I told him to stop. I was recognizable as a police officer, and I told him to stop, and he understood. It looked like, I know he heard me, and he didn't. And he didn't drop the weapon. He gets shot. That's what he thinks, because the officer should not be the one to get shot. And no, we don't need to be shot at first. There is no law, there's no rule that says that. There's no training that says that. If there is, they're friggin' wrong, because I do not have to wait for these people. It's what we see at that moment and at that time. Now, mind you, if you shoot somebody in the head, there's a greater chance that they're going to die. Sometimes suspects are wearing body armor. Sometimes the shots to the body just aren't effective, and that train is still going. So you got to take out that circuit modulator that runs everything quickly, and it'll stop them dead in their tracks. A headshot's not an easy shot, of course. I sometimes teach to shoot to the pelvis. Shoot somebody in the pelvis. There's a lot of blood work going on in there, veins and arteries and stuff, and your pelvic bone is there. And obviously, you take the legs out, then the upper body goes along with it, and they're no longer mobile. So one of two ways, but we always think of body armor drills as to the body, one to the head. Why not to the body, or however many to the body and to the pelvis? Plus, it's a lower shot. I won't go down that rabbit hole, but those are just my suggestions. So I've got 2 video clips for y'all to watch of SAPD officers chasing armed suspects with tasers drawn, and 1 clip of an SAPD officer doing, in my professional opinion, an excellent job on an armed suspect. This first clip is from an incident that occurred on October 17, 2023 on Gus Garcia Road, and that's in San Antonio. Happened at 5 a.m. And it looks like a single unit doubled up with 2 officers. That might tell me that these guys were assigned to do directed patrol. Certain service areas of town, the substations will have, just dependent on their manpower, put 2 officers together that ride in the same unit, and they respond to the hot calls, but they're supposed to be doing proactive activity, looking for crime as a progress, just doing good police work like they're supposed to. So that may be the case, or maybe they didn't have enough cars. I don't know. Maybe they had so many officers that they just doubled up the district guys or whatever. But 2 is better than 1. I've already believed that. So they see a vehicle, expired registration. There's their probable cause to conduct a traffic stop. I hate to say routine traffic stop, because nothing is routine. They're not always the same. And any officer that treats them as such, you're just waiting to roll snake eyes with your dice. It's dangerous. You treat every situation as different, regardless. Even if it's the same person that you might know, you approach them with no expectations whatsoever. So they try to stop this car, and you'll see the vehicle, they start to elude, in a sense. They slow roll is what we call it. They're not running away from you, but they're not stopping. And that's dangerous in and of itself, because if they speed away from you, you kind of already know what intentions they have. But when they're slow rolling, You don't know if they're thinking about running from you or thinking about jumping out of the vehicle and ambushing you. That is just something you should keep in mind. Then they turn into a residential neighborhood, and lots of times they think they can lose you there because a lot of them, I mean, that is their neighborhood, and they know all the nooks and crannies, hiding spots, perfect places to stop, dark areas, or homes that they can flee into, relatives, family. That happens a lot. So when it finally does stop, both suspects get out and they run away on foot. So they're evading arrest. That's the first crime that they're committing. And you see the officers split up. One officer chases the driver, the other officer chases the passenger. And you'll see that the officer chases the driver, catches him immediately. I don't know if he was that fast or the suspect was that slow or both accordingly, or he fell. You know, that so many things can happen in that situation. Nonetheless, nothing really happens. You see him walking the suspect back. The other officer chases the suspect another direction. They usually split up. And I'll let you watch it.
One of the officers observed the suspect with a gun. That officer then yelled "gun" and drew his service pistol as he announced over the radio that the suspect passenger was armed. Gun! Gun! As officers pursued the suspect both on foot and in marked patrol vehicles, the suspect continued evading on foot through the residential neighborhood with a gun in hand. An officer on foot saw the suspect at South Colorado attempting to jump a chain link fence of a home on Gus Garcia. That officer yelled at the suspect to drop his gun. Hey, drop the... Officers in the front of the home on Gus Garcia observed the suspect turn towards them and raise the gun at them. These officers then pointed their weapons at the suspect and shot multiple rounds, striking the suspect. Hey, watch out! Watch out! Stop reaching for it! Stop reaching for it! Here. Running back westbound, westbound. Westbound on this part again. Here's holding description. Stop! Here is a slowed-down version from the second officer's body-worn camera. Officers provided life-saving measures to the suspect at the scene prior to EMS arrival. The suspect, identified as 19-year-old Richard Rodriguez, was pronounced deceased at the scene. A second firearm was found concealed in Rodriguez. So
now that you've seen it, and you can go back and forth, hopefully, obviously stop it, watch it. And they're really cool videos to watch. I will compliment the officer that was chasing the suspect on the right, who ended up was the one that had the gun, had the weapon. By not following directly behind, he kind of runs off to the left, to the side of him. That's smart. So in case this guy does draw his weapon and turn around and shoot, and he's not in that path. But the negative part of that is that he loses sight of it. Now, if you watch closely on that, when that suspect's running, he's holding something in his waistband, and I've seen that a lot. And that should give you a sign that either this guy's got a weapon, but he may be holding his pants up, because a lot of them like to sag their pants. They don't have a belt. If they don't hold their pants up, they're going to fall at their waist and they're going to trip, which I've seen before too, and it's funny as hell. But you should immediately think that he's holding a weapon. So the officer, you see in these stills that we're going to put up here, that taser in his weapon hand, his strong hand. And I know it's his strong and weapon hand, because later he draws his gun and it's in that hand. You see him catch up. When he sees the gun, he transitions, keeps the gun in his strong hand, but he has put his taser in his left hand. That's a support hand, mind you. Didn't want to drop it for whatever reason. I get it, but I think they'll give you another one if for some reason it's lost at that point. But you need that support hand. You don't want to get involved in the shooting with just your strong hand. One-handed shooting should really only occur if you are shot in that other arm or hand or whatever, or maybe you're holding somebody close or whatever, but you should always use your best shooting platform, which is two hands. They catch up to the other officer that you see in the video come up in a vehicle. They corner the suspect, and they end up having to shoot him. So the mortality of this officer, and I always say that, his health, his well-being, was not because he did anything right during the foot chase. Now, I will say that let's say he did have his deadly weapon drawn, that he would have won that shootout had that occurred, but it would have given him a better chance at success had he had his weapon in his hand. The other negative part about chasing somebody with a weapon in your hand is that if you catch them, then you have a weapon in your hand. So you're occupied. So you got to do something with it. Holster it quickly. I don't suggest you drop it or set it down. You have to holster it and implement your holster's retention on it. But I think I should also say, and I should have said this at the very beginning, I don't know these officers, and I give them total credit for one, being a police officer in these days and signing up for this difficult job. And I'm not trying to demean them in any way, shape, or form. I hope if they do see this and they know that that's them, that they seek out, maybe ask me some questions about it. Because I won't say, I guess I don't consider myself, but I guess I am an expert to this at this point. I finished my career. I've done these things. I've chased armed suspects. I've been involved in shooting. It's I won't say the guru or anything like that, but I've been involved and been experienced that way. So I hope that they seek out and maybe take it as constructive criticism and go, yeah, he's right. Talk to someone else about it that you trust, whatever. But nonetheless, don't do that, okay? So this other clip happened 6 days later, October 23rd, 2023, the 2500 block of South General McMullen, just after 1 a.m., early morning. And like I mentioned before, it's only 6 days away from this first clip that we saw. And things happen that way a lot. I was involved in a shooting on SWAT of a hostage taker. And mine was the second shooting among 6 that happened in the span of 13 days. And of course, this is all on the news, and all the anti-police whiners are saying that, we're just rogue, wanting to kill everybody. We shoot first, ask questions later. But it's never the suspect's fault. We're in a big city, and sometimes crime ebbs and flows. And that is just the way it goes. No one picked these shootings and said, hey, we need to have this many within a certain amount of time. That's just what happens, okay? That it's not officers just trying to shoot first and ask questions later. As you see in these clips here, these guys were armed. We don't stop and go, oh man, this is too many shootings this month. We can only be involved in a couple because the citizens might complain. We don't do that. But that's the way it goes. So this officer, he's doing exactly what the citizens of San Antonio want him to do. Hopefully the police department wants him to do. He is looking for proactive activity. He is looking for crime. He's looking for suspects. He's looking for suspicious activity. He's looking for crimes in progress. He is doing, the best thing to do is to catch somebody before they commit the crime. Stop the crime before it's committed. That is the best thing for things to happen to keep the public safe. If you react, crime's already been committed, there's some victim or victims, and I'm sure they would have preferred that the police stopped it before that. So he sees this Hispanic male walking through this complex, which I'm sure he knows this complex is known for a lot of criminal activity. He sees this guy with a gun in his waist, and he gets out to stop him. So watch this and we'll talk about it.
For high call volume of reported criminal activity. While driving through an apartment complex, the officer observed a male with a handgun in his waistband. The officer stopped and exited his marked patrol vehicle as he called out to the male.
Hey, come here, bro. Let me talk to you.
The male immediately took off running as he fled from the officer through the apartment complex. The officer chased after the male, broadcasting over the radio that he was pursuing after a male, and provided the dispatcher with a description. The officer ordered the male to stop, but he continued to run. As the officer ran after the male, the officer deployed his taser on the male, but was unsuccessful. As the pursuit continued, the male tripped and fell. The officer caught up to the male as the male fell to the ground. The officer attempted to grab the suspect's hands, which were in front of his body, but he refused to give them up. The officer and the suspect struggled over the suspect's handgun as the suspect reached towards his waist to grab the firearm. During the struggle, the officer can be heard telling the suspect to let it go and let go of it, referring to the handgun. Fearing for his life, the officer stepped back and fired several rounds at the suspect. After shooting at the suspect, the officer can be heard telling the suspect to drop it, again referring to the handgun.
Stop! Drop it!
Officers provided life-saving measures to the suspect at the scene prior to EMS arrival. The suspect, identified as 34-year-old Ruben Garcia, was pronounced deceased at the scene. A loaded firearm was located underneath Garcia.
So he gets out. Now, I'm not going to say he should have drawn his gun immediately. That's up to him. I don't know if he knew this guy, if he knew his history whatsoever. Maybe he didn't. But hopefully he was ready. Maybe he had his hand on his gun, ready to draw if he needed to. I'm going to give him that credit, and hopefully that's what it was. You can't see his hands, so I'm going to give it to them. He calls to him, says, "Hey, come here." The guy takes off running. Well, I think that pretty much tells you that this guy was not a concealed carry license holder. He wasn't a constitutional carry holder or open carry holder. And he was probably up to no good because he flees from the police. If he's a constitutional carry license holder, he would stop and go, "Hey, officer, how are you?" And definitely don't touch the gun anyway, but he's not. So he's fleeing. Officers chasing him with the taser in his hand. Now, a lot of times these officers place their body cams in different positions on their vests. Some put it right in the middle, some put it lower, some put it higher. So it's going to catch a little bit different. It kind of has a fisheye view too, but it's going to catch a little bit different views. And you can't really see the taser in his hand, but he's chasing him. And the narrative is telling you he's got a taser in his hand. He tries tasing the guy as he's running. Again, I told you they're not supposed to do that, but again, he's armed. If it works, it works. The guy keeps on running. He trips and falls. And if you see in the video, the officer catches up to him. He's got a gun now in his right hand. Now you see how dangerous it is because he puts that gun hand with that gun on his back as he's trying to control him. Now, mind you, nothing says, nor does he say, or anybody say that this guy has abandoned the gun, has tossed the gun. That happens a lot too. These guys will run and they'll throw the gun. They abandon it. So now they're not armed. So I'm thinking he's believing that this guy is still armed. He is, and obviously is armed. So they get into struggle with each other over this gun in his waistband. The officer is that close, trying to prevent him from trying to grab that gun. We are not responsible for that. As close as you are, your reactionary time is way behind if you're that close to this guy. Luckily for the officer, he realizes, I can't do this. This guy's still reaching. He breaks away and he fires and he shoots the suspect. Good outcome. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to feel bad for this guy because he got shot and or killed, or either one of them, because he was told to stop and they didn't take that advice. They give them the best advice of their life. Stop, drop the weapon. You don't take it, I don't know what else to tell you. I've yet to see somebody say, well, it may still be alive after the shooting. I didn't understand it. They know what they're not supposed to be doing. So it's on him. We all have consequences for our actions. I do too. Okay, if I do something stupid and I get hurt doing it, that's on me. I should know better. And that's the way I see these. So just something else. This officer saw the gun in this suspect's waistband. The other officer didn't know he had one until he kind of got up to him. We're not mind readers. I always tell people, if I was a mind reader and I knew what you were thinking, I would have a 1-800 number and be making money selling futures to people. I wish I did. I wouldn't have to be a cop, make a living, all that other stuff. But we are not mind readers. We are taught to assume that every suspect that is involved in criminality is armed until we make sure that they're unarmed by a search or a frisk. And oftentimes that is not 100% either. Guns have been missed. They show up to jail with the gun still on their person, and it's found by jail personnel searching them, or people are shot, officers are shot when they're opening the door for this person that they've been transporting the whole time that's gotten a gun from wherever they missed it, deep down in their crotch or whatever. That's just the way it goes. But officers need to understand that when someone flees from you, there's a reason, and it's an ill-intended reason to get away from you. And you may not know who this is. Could be FBI's #1 top 10 wanted person. You have to assume these things. One thing to understand, and the reason I bring this up, and it's not just training telling you not to do this, but there's also case law that justifies you in not doing this. Plakas versus Drinski, 1991 Supreme Court case. But that Supreme Court has decided the use of less lethal alternative was not required when the use of deadly force by police was justified. So that's telling you don't have to use any lesser force to conduct the operation than you would had you been justified in using deadly force. No one and nothing says that I need to shoot someone with a less lethal weapon, so I have to avoid shooting or killing somebody. That's in the law. You don't have to. Now, I know a lot of people in society would expect that from you. And lately, because of the way the nation is going, a bunch of whiners and crybabies, a bunch of anti-police, a bunch of sensitive people expect the officers to do that. It's unrealistic. It doesn't make sense. And it's not their lives on the line. They just don't like that someone got shot, regardless of how justified it was. That is ridiculous. Quit listening to these people. Know your case laws. Know your justifications. Know your penal code. All the justifications are there. Your criminal code of procedure that tells you what you're allowed to do in certain situations. Now, a lot of it, you have to interpret this in a split second. Know that. Understand that. It's in case law that you don't have to use any lesser force than deadly force. Quit chasing people with tasers. Flat out. I'm going to say that. You can argue with me. I don't care. It's wrong. It is dumb. Okay? I'm not calling these officers dumb. The actions, the choices to do that are dumb. I do get it. You're trying to preserve yourself from being indicted by rogue attorneys like we have right here in Bexar County. A Soros-bought DA who was indicting officers on actions they took that they are 100% justified in doing. And he's only doing it to placate to the anti-police crybabies. And oftentimes, he'd rather you roll the dice in court and him trying to prove that you did wrong than immediately say, well, we can't charge him because he did right. He doesn't want to face those people. He'd have to give a statement. He'd probably get some backlash. He'd probably get protested against. That's cowardice. Do your friggin' job. But instead you put these officers' lives on hold for 3 to 4 years. They don't know. For one, they have to find another form of income, find another job. 2, they have to worry about if they're going to go to prison or not 3 or 4 years. That's ridiculous. I get it, officers. It sucks. It does. But I am involved with defense attorneys that are defending people like yourself, and I'll do it till my last breath with my expertise, because I believe I can explain a lot of this stuff professionally, and I have. So cut it out. One more clip, and this is a good clip, and this is, what do we like to say? Always like to end on a good note. This officer, in my mind, there's 2 officers, did excellent in their tactics. So again, late at night, happened the next month, November 27, 2023, 4400 block of West Commerce. Officers, again, doubled up in the same unit. And you can hear the conversations between them talking back and forth. They see this vehicle. I don't know why they caught on to it, but they start talking. And one of the officers recognizes, hey, that's that suspect. I believe a name they got probably from the registration or something connected to the registration, that's that suspect from earlier. I don't know what suspect. I don't know what happened earlier that night, earlier in the week, earlier in the day. I don't know. But here they found a suspect involved in criminality. They go to stop him. The vehicle pulls over right away. Passenger jumps out and flees on foot. Passenger officer, who's on the passenger seat, gets out, chases him. Nothing in his hands. You can plainly see that. Fast guy. That's awesome. I used to be fast back when I was younger. I didn't lose too many foot chases. The foot chases are fun, mind you, but adrenaline rush is awesome. So this officer's chasing him. This guy's zigzagging. They're kind of in an open area. And he's headed towards what looks like a McDonald's. And the officer is yelling at him to stop. He's giving him lawful orders to comply. Now, what it shows, and what I believe, he doesn't see a weapon right away. But he yells at the suspect and gives him a ruse. He tries to trick him into believing he's about to get tased. He says, stop, I'll tase you. And that works, I won't even say half the time, but it's worked before. If this guy falls flat out, spread eagles, hoping you don't get tased, then you accomplish the objective. But it didn't in this situation. He even says, taser, 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 which is a command they give before they deploy a taser, trying to display to this guy that I'm about to shoot you with it. Well, instead of getting compliance from this guy realizes I'm not getting away, and he draws the weapon from wherever he had it, probably in his waistband, and he turns to shoot the officer. He has to turn because the officer's behind him. Now, the smart thing that this officer does is he realizes this guy draws with his right hand, and he can only go so far as he's running to shoot behind him without turning completely around and running backwards. So the officer moves to his left, which makes it a lot more difficult for the officer, for the suspect to shoot him. Very smart. That was awesome. But then he sees the guy draw the gun, and you hear him say, oh, shit. Yeah, oh, shit. Now you see a gun, and the dude draws quickly and shoots the suspect. And so does the other officer as he's coming up upon him. It's a great shooting. They don't shoot too many times. They don't, sometimes you see officers like unload magazines, and one magazine at least, shooting at someone that may look down and incapacitated. But these guys were under control. I think these guys did a great job. Whoever you are, this video should be used in training. Hopefully SAPD is using it. Hopefully other officers trying to see what you do right should watch this. If I knew the officers, knew who they were, I'd call them and say, hey, man, I saw that shooting. You did a great job.
31, we have a car taking off from us. 4227 Alpha 11. It's going to be Toyota Camry, silver in color. He's got a backpack on. Stop running! I am going to fucking tase you! I'm gonna tase you! You're gonna get fucking tased! Taser, taser, taser! Johnny, come out! Let me see your fucking hands! Oh shit!
Here's another view of the second officer's body-worn camera.
So there you have it, the success of what an officer should do and the chances these officers take on what they're doing, which I believe is wrong. Hopefully they weren't trained that way. Hopefully someone didn't mention to them, but officers, stop doing that, okay? I appreciate y'all listening. Please give me some feedback. If you want to talk about it, I don't mind. If you have some questions, I don't mind. You can email me. If you know somebody that knows me, call me, please. But I appreciate it. I'm going to keep on talking about these things. Y'all have a good day.